Lando Norris has come under heavy fire after his performance last weekend, and many argue that the criticism is justified. Just a few years ago, Norris suggested that Lewis Hamilton's dominance was simply a result of driving the best car. Now, for the first time, Norris finds himself in a similar situation, driving one of the fastest cars on the grid. However, he's quickly learning that having a top-tier vehicle isn't a guarantee for victory. This revelation raises questions: what does this mean for Norris's chances of securing a championship title? And more importantly, is the backlash he's facing truly deserved? At the Formula One United States Grand Prix lies, Norris admitted that his poor driving at the start led to a tense encounter with Max Verstappen. In the early stages of the race, Verstappen launched an aggressive move on Norris, overtaking him into the first corner. This forced both drivers off the racing line and allowed Charles Leclerc to seize the lead on his way to a comfortable win. Although Verstappen's move was bold, it occurred on the opening lap, which typically leads to more lenient judgments from the stewards. As a result, no penalties were handed out for this maneuver. Later in the race, as Norris tried to reclaim a podium spot, Verstappen once again pushed the limits. In their battle for position, both drivers ran off the track. However, it was Norris who was penalized for gaining an advantage by leaving the track. Despite the controversy, Norris took responsibility for the incident. He admitted that if he had defended more effectively at the start, he wouldn't have ended up in such a tough spot. Reflecting on his own performance, he stated, "If I had done a better job into turn 1, we wouldn't even be having this conversation." McLaren's team principal Andrea Stella was careful not to direct his frustration toward Verstappen in the aftermath of the race. Instead, he focused his criticism on the race stewards and the ambiguity in Formula One's rules. Meanwhile, Norris showed respect for his rival, acknowledging the difficulty of racing side by side. "Max drove really well," Norris remarked. "It's hard to gauge your braking point when you're going faster than usual. The tires are older, and the track has bumps and dirt. It's challenging, but it was a good, competitive battle." Despite the intense on-track clashes, Norris insisted he enjoyed the duel. "It was tough, but I think it was fair," he added. However, many feel sympathy for Norris. The young driver is in a challenging situation as he fights for his first ever world championship. To stay in contention, Norris must consistently outperform Verstappen, a task that seems nearly impossible given Verstappen's form. Each race presents another opportunity for Verstappen to assert his dominance, and Norris has already learned firsthand how far Max is willing to go to defend a critical position. Their rivalry isn't new. This dynamic has been building since Austria, where both drivers made contact during an aggressive battle, ruining each other's races. However, Norris suffered more from the clash than Verstappen did, offering him a bitter lesson about the lengths Verstappen is prepared to go for victory. The stakes were high in Austria, with both drivers competing for the lead, but the fight resumed in Austin, this time for a spot on the podium. Once again, Verstappen's uncompromising approach left Norris struggling to find a way through. The fierce duel between Norris and Verstappen in Austin highlighted a deeper issue within Formula One. While Ferrari's dominance and Leclerc's victory should have been the focus of post-race discussions, the narrative shifted toward regulatory inconsistencies, stewards' decisions, and track limits. The debate between McLaren and Red Bull became a prime example of how complicated F1's rules have become. Red Bull insisted that Norris's overtake was illegal since he gained an advantage by going off the track, a claim that the stewards upheld. Meanwhile, McLaren argued that Verstappen's aggressive move pushed Norris off the track and set a dangerous precedent by allowing drivers to force opponents out of position without consequence. Verstappen seems to have mastered the art of exploiting the current rules. Under the existing guidelines, a defending driver on the inside line can maintain their position by releasing the brakes early to reach the apex first. This tactic leaves little to no space for the car on the outside, making it nearly impossible to overtake without running off the track. With these rules in place, drivers attempting outside passes now face an even steeper challenge than before. Mercedes, too, voiced their frustration. They pointed out that George Russell was penalized for a similar incident involving Valtteri Bottas, where Russell was deemed responsible for not leaving enough space for Bottas at the exit. The inconsistency lies in how the rules differentiate between attacking and defending drivers. The stewards hold the attacking driver accountable for maintaining safe control within track limits, yet Verstappen escaped punishment despite Norris being penalized. The stewards justified this by applying a 5-second penalty to Norris rather than a harsher 10-second penalty. They also overlooked Norris's fourth track limits violation, adding to the controversy. Another layer of complexity comes from the steward's approach to lap 1 incidents. During the opening lap, a more lenient let-them-race philosophy is applied, encouraging aggressive moves without fear of immediate penalties. This creates confusion for fans, who struggle to understand the consistency behind the rules. What makes it even more complicated is that the guidelines are open to interpretation, as seen in the differing opinions between Red Bull and McLaren in Austin. The current rules grant stewards significant discretion, which can result in decisions that vary from race to race. Looking ahead to 2025, the FIA plans to extend these racing guidelines across all levels of motorsport, including grassroots racing. However, the inconsistency in how these rules are applied raises questions about their long-term effectiveness. Many wonder if adjustments will be made to encourage more clean wheel-to-wheel racing within track boundaries rather than outside of them. If future regulations allow attacking drivers to maintain their position even when forced off the track, it could inspire more exciting battles while keeping the racing fair. But the key challenge remains: will the FIA be willing to relinquish some control and simplify the rulebook to make the sport more straightforward? There is a growing sentiment that F1's current regulations are overly complicated and prone to subjective interpretation. McLaren's frustrations with the FIA were further heightened by how quickly Norris's penalty was handed out. Team principal Andrea Stella criticized the stewards for rushing the decision before gathering input from both drivers involved. In complex situations like this, the stewards should take their time, review everything after the race, and listen to both drivers, Stella explained. The rapid decision-making by the stewards reflects F1's desire to ensure that the correct drivers are celebrated on the podium. Having a winner stripped of their achievement hours after the race would tarnish the sport's reputation. As a result, stewards are often encouraged to make swift calls if they believe a situation is clear-cut. However, this approach raises concerns about fairness, as it can overlook key nuances in complex incidents like the clash between Norris and Verstappen. Some argue that simplifying the regulations and allowing natural track boundaries to determine racing outcomes would reduce the reliance on stewards' subjective decisions. If overtaking and defending were governed by clearer, less interpretable rules, it might encourage more organic racing and fewer post-race controversies. Still, the FIA is unlikely to give up its authority anytime soon, as maintaining control over the rulebook is a significant part of its power. The current distinction between attacking and defending cars complicates matters further, contributing to incidents like those seen in Austin. This imbalance makes it difficult to achieve consistent decisions, with drivers often left frustrated by the unpredictability. Many believe that narrowing the rulebook would lead to more exciting and fair racing, as the distinction between what is allowed in different scenarios would become clearer. The question remains: does the rulebook need reform to promote better racing, and is Lando Norris underperforming now that he's driving one of the fastest cars? With over 15 races behind him in a competitive McLaren, his struggles are becoming more apparent. What do you think? Are the current rules fair, or is it time for a change? And more importantly, has Norris failed to capitalize on having a top-tier car this season? Share your thoughts in the comments below.